Jeffrey Turner, aka Mega Jetty 1, and you can bet on that. I just got my ass kicked again by Cobra Kai. Hey, wait. Haven't we done this before?
The Karate Kid Part 3 rehashes, continues, and concludes the Karate Kid trilogy as Daniel-san and Mr. Miyagi once again stand up to Sensei John Kreese of the Cobra Kai Karate Dojo. This time, John Kreese is aided by a war buddy of his named Terry Silver, who helped co-found Cobra Kai and has amassed immense wealth in the toxic waste disposal business. Together, they enlist a kickboxing champion named Mike Barnes to be the ruthless disciple that Johnny Lawrence wasn't, and they sow seeds of distrust between Daniel-san and Mr. Miyagi, all to prove that Cobra Kai never dies. Let's take a look at the third installment of this franchise and see why Daniel-san is the best around and why no one's ever going to keep him down.
You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down. You're the best around. And nothing's gonna ever keep you down. You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down.
Yeah, I couldn't find any good Karate Kid Part 3 songs from the soundtrack, so I'm gonna have to reuse some old songs just to compensate for it. We open up the Karate Kid Part 3 with a recap of what led up to this from the previous two movies. Daniel has beaten Johnny Lawrence and earned his respect, angering his sensei John Kreese to the point of strangling him. Mr. Miyagi goes over to save Johnny, and this results in a showdown between Mr. Miyagi and John Kreese.
Mercy is for the weak. We do not train to be merciful here. A man face you, he is enemy. Enemy deserve no mercy.
You could have killed him, couldn't you?
Right?
Well, why didn't you then?
Because, Daniel-san, for person with no forgiveness in heart, living even worse punishment than death.
We then cut to many months after this and see John Kreese is down on his luck. He lost all his Cobra Kai students and is in danger of losing his dojo as he can't afford to pay the rent, blaming all his loss on Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. He goes to see his old Vietnam War buddy Terry Silver, who is not only a wealthy waste disposer, but is also the co-founder of Cobra Kai. Kreese is about to hand him over the keys to the dojo and move on when Silver instead advises that he go to Tahiti and recover while he starts plotting against the ones responsible for his buddy's low point.
Come on, say it. Cobra Kai. Say it, Cobra Kai.
Never dies.
Bet your ass.
You know, I probably should not be liking these guys because they are going to be the villains and are going to try and make Daniel and Mr. Miyagi's lives miserable. But the camaraderie they have, it's just so damn relatable. I mean, John Kreese, he has lost everything. He's at a low point. And so, yeah, it's understandable that he wants revenge. But like Mr. Miyagi did say, his problem is that he doesn't know how to learn to let go and forgive. As Kreese enters the airport to take his time to recuperate in Tahiti, not even feet away, Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are exiting the airport upon returning from Okinawa, passing Kreese without even seeing him. Had they seen him, his plan with Silver could have been finished before it even started. They return to the old motel where Daniel's apartment was to find that it is being turned into a condo, and Mr. Miyagi is left without a job. Upon calling his mom and learning that she's back in Newark caring for Uncle Louie, we learn from Daniel that he and Kumiko went separate ways as she went to Tokyo to pursue her dream as a professional dancer. While Daniel and Mr. Miyagi plan their next steps in life, Terry Silver finds a kickboxing champion named Mike Barnes and hires him to harass Daniel to make him want to compete in the All Valley 85 tournament to defend his title as champion against Barnes. As Daniel and Mr. Miyagi figure out what to do, the duo plant a bonsai near where Mr. Miyagi planted one of the last 3 Okinawan bonsai before Mr. Miyagi begins teaching the latest in Miyagi-Do to Daniel, the kata technique. And as Mr. Miyagi performs his movements, Daniel does his best to mimic him as they train at the edge on top of a mountain. Meanwhile, Daniel uses his college fund to help Mr. Miyagi realize his dream, and together they open up a bonsai shop. Needing pots to place the bonsais in, Daniel visits the local pottery and meets Jessica Andrews, who constructs pots. As he requests what kind of pots he wants, he asks her out, to which she accepts. Upon their night out, though, Daniel learns that she's got a boyfriend out of town and the two simply stay friends. I'd say that's a very interesting change of pace, because he's already fallen for 2 girls inside of 2 movies in 1 whole year. So having a third love interest be just a platonic friend kind of makes things a little more interesting. After all, it definitely breaks a pattern that was pretty much developing in this series. As they have macaroni and cheese for dinner, Mike Barnes and his goons show up and harass the two, even going as far as kicking Jessica in the stomach. But Mr. Miyagi arrives and sends them fleeing. The next day, as Mr. Miyagi is helping Daniel with his kata technique, Terry Silver arrives and, after taking time to sneak into Miyagi's home and learning about him through his personal effects, pretends to be a friend as he bows respectfully and informs Daniel-san and Mr. Miyagi that John Kreese died of a heart attack after disgracing himself. The two are fooled by this, and Terry Silver walks away with a devilish grin. Gotta admire a villain who's willing to crack a devilish grin after he turns his back on his enemies. After Daniel is once again harassed by Mike Barnes in his own home with Miyagi, Silver arrives to chase Mike Barnes away before offering to teach Daniel some Cobra Kai lessons. Barnes then escalates the harassment by trashing the bonsai shop and leaving Daniel and Mr. Miyagi with no means to keep the business going. To try and get money to keep the shop alive, Daniel and Jessica climb down the cliff to collect Mr. Miyagi's prized Okinawan bonsai, which is said to be worth lots of money due to how rare it is. Upon acquiring the rare bonsai, they are trapped as Mike Barnes arrives and takes the ropes, leaving them trapped and likely to die unless Daniel signs the document to defend his title in the All-Valley tournament. Left with no other choice, he goes against Mr. Miyagi's wishes of not competing due to having nothing to prove and signs the document. As they are pulled back up, Mike Barnes proves just how uncaring he really is as he snaps the prized bonsai tree. Daniel brings it back to Mr. Miyagi, and he is distraught by this. As Silver talks with Kreese over the phone as they relish in their planning, Kreese asks Silver to make Daniel's knuckles bleed, like Miyagi made his bleed, much to Silver's delight. As Daniel tries to ask Mr. Miyagi to train him, Mr. Miyagi either jokes around or outright refuses, angering Daniel and forcing him to seek out Silver for training. As Daniel dons the Cobra Kai uniform, he is shown the more brutal offensive style of Cobra Kai, and he slowly embraces the dark side of karate. The more he learns from Silver, the more he alienates Mr. Miyagi by lying to him about what he's up to. One night, he outright yells at Mr. Miyagi, making his mentor and father figure cry. When Daniel takes Jessica dancing, Silver pays a guy to provoke Daniel, and this results in Daniel breaking his nose. Jessica is both terrified and upset with Daniel, and this snaps him out of his lust for Cobra Kai training as he tries to apologize to her. After Jessica forgives him, Daniel calls the hospital to try and pay for the injury he caused, only for his frustration to get him hung up. Mr. Miyagi then tries to cheer Daniel up as he shows him that the Okinawan bonsai has healed itself due to having strong roots. As Daniel returns to the Cobra Kai dojo and tells Silver he's done with Cobra Kai, Silver then drops the charade and reveals Mike Barnes was working for him the whole time. As Daniel attempts to leave, John Kreese jumps in front of him and reveals the entire plan of getting it into his head. Mr. Miyagi then arrives and saves Daniel as he incapacitates Barnes. He then fights John Kreese and Terry Silver. Right then and there, I think Mr. Miyagi realizes he should have done things differently.
Enemy deserve no mercy.
Instead of dwelling on the past, Mr. Miyagi agrees to train Daniel for the tournament. By the time of the tournament, Daniel stands on the sidelines and watches as Mike Barnes excels through the tournament to the finals. As Daniel squares off with Barnes, with the referee from the previous year officiating the match, Daniel starts off good, only for Barnes to gain a point with a fair hit before losing one with a cheating hit. He repeats this strategy at Silver's request, and Daniel is hurting to the point where he wants to quit. But Mr. Miyagi tells him not to.
Mr. Miyagi, it's over! It's over, forget about it!
No!
I'm afraid! Let's just get out of here, I wanna go home!
Cannot, must not. It's okay, lose to opponent. Must not lose to fear.
Yo, I'm afraid! I'm afraid of him, alright? What do you want to do?
You stay focused. Tell us how your best karate still inside. Now time, let out.
Daniel gets back up and decides to distract Barnes with the kata technique. Daniel has done it again and is your reigning, defending, undisputed All-Valley Karate Champion! And with that said, next week we will be taking a look at the next installment to the Karate Kid franchise.
Karate Kid!
No, not that silly yet cool cartoon that came out months later. No, I'm referring to the next Karate Kid. And you can bet on that!
Karate Kid! Karate Kid!
I'm Jeffrey Turner.